Hi, Dave from Informed America here, talking to you about the impact of the coronavirus on the community and culture all around the world. So today I welcome this very special guest, Lauren Hogan, coming all the way from Shanghai, China. She's going to talk about her experience living in China and going through this pandemic, all the things that happened for her, how she prepared, how she got through it, and now is kind of getting life a little bit back to normal. So I think you're really going to enjoy this chat because she is just a positive spirit. And she's got a lot of words of advice and comfort to help you get through this thing. So I think this is something we all need at this time, finding that light of tunnel. And then once we get through it, how we can get back to normal and move on with our lives. So with that, let's get right to it. Lauren Hogan, thank you so much for joining me, coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out. You are joining us all the way around, almost halfway around the world from Shanghai, China. Thank you so much. What's going on in China at the moment?
Yeah, so things are finally starting to open back up. It's definitely feeling a bit more normal again after having closed for about 2 months here. And with spring coming around, and there's just a new energy back into the city, which is great.
That's excellent. Now, before we get into all that, maybe so everybody can find out or learn a little bit about yourself. You're a general manager at F45 Training, and you're also a freelance writer. Now, Lauren, for people like me who are lazy and don't work out, what is F45 Training? What do you do?
So F45 Training is a fitness franchise. So there's a ton over in the US as well. And it stands for functional training for 45 minutes. So it's circuit-based workouts, a mix of high intensity as well as weights and resistance. And every day the program changes, so it's always something different.
Excellent. Now I found out, I did a little searching, that there's one of those in the city next to me. So is it for can a lazy bum like me make it? Is it for everybody, or do you have to be like really sophisticated or like a really good, like a workout warrior or something like that?
No, it's adaptable. Any age, any range of fitness, we can adapt exercises and make sure everyone feels comfortable and enjoys the workout and doesn't feel like it's a drag to get into there.
What's your style? Are you like boot camp drill instructor, or do you have a softer touch?
I like dancing and cheerleading.
Okay. That's hilarious. So did you, were you doing that? I just want to know how you got to China. Were you doing this for F45 in the United States? Would you, and by the way, where did you grow up?
So I'm a military brat, so okay. I've moved around the world growing up, but I went to school in Orlando, and I studied broadcast journalism there and found my way to Shanghai to work for a English-based magazine here. So I did that for about 3.5 years, moved back to the US, and then moved back again to Shanghai for a few freelance projects, where that led me to now working in fitness. So a bit of a switch.
Yeah. So you've sort of been all over the place, and so I mean, do you like that? I'm assuming you're enjoying that lifestyle, kind of going to place, and maybe just discovering new things and discovering new cultures and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been here for almost 10 years now, so it's been a while at this point. But I feel like Shanghai is a melting pot where you meet people from all over the world, different cultures, different energies, and you kind of get this new freedom of trying to do different things while you're here as well, which is great.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I noticed you said you sort of pronounce. I'm just American. I say Shanghai, and you're a little softer on the A. Like, is it Shanghai? Is that more the pronunciation?
Yeah, Shanghai.
Okay, I'll see if I can keep up with that.
But I'll accept Shanghai too.
Okay. So you've been there for 10 years. So I would assume you've picked up some Chinese. How fluent are you?
Enough to get around. Taxi Chinese.
Is it difficult?
Yes, it is difficult. There's 4 different tones. So even if you say one word one way, sometimes people will look at you and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, but I'm saying it right. And they're like, nah, you're not.
What's the level of English there? A lot of people speak it?
Yeah, for the most part, I'd say, I mean, taxis a little bit less, but for the most part, it does feel like a global city. So you can navigate and get around with English, generally speaking.
Well, what about your clients? Are they mostly English speakers, or because I'm imagining if you're shouting instructions in Chinese and if it's the wrong tone, are they going to do like the completely wrong exercise or run into the wall or something?
can't say I've had that experience yet, but it could be worth a try. No, we talk in mostly English throughout the classes.
Great. What did you notice? So, I mean, I'm thinking about, I don't know why I had it in my head that you would only live there for a short period of time, but 10 years is quite a commitment. So what have you noticed over that time, growing up in the United States? And of course, as you mentioned, global cities tend to be similar, of course, but it depends where they are. Talk about some of the maybe contrast, some of the differences in culture, ways of living between the United States and China for people like me who don't really know really anything about China. So.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is how much we use our phones, and I don't mean that in terms of like text messaging, but for paying for things. Even you go to the local fruit shop on the corner, and you just scan your QR code. We use a program called either WeChat or Alipay.
Okay.
And you just scan it, and you pay $1 for your apples, or you go order a car. I mean, it's like Uber. You order a car, and it comes right to your door. Mm-hmm. You pay for your groceries on your phone and they get delivered to you. It's a very phone-based culture here. And I think, I know we'll talk about coronavirus later, but I think in a way that being on our phones and with this attachment in the QRs has definitely shaped some of the measures that have been taken as we've moved out of it as well.
Well, we can get into that right now. We're unstructured here. We're just kind of having a chat. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's get into the coronavirus. We're thinking. Well, I don't know, like the timeline for you. You might have gotten wind of this before most of us in the United States. But my knowledge is I started hearing things maybe late December, early January. But what was sort of your first? Oh wow, there's a virus, in Wuhan or something like that. What was kind of the process for you when this all started?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we got, a lot of us, Kate, were gone for Christmas holidays, came back the first week of January, had about 3 weeks until the Chinese holiday here, Chinese New Year. And that's where, everything shuts down in the city. Everyone goes back to their hometowns. Some people decide to stay because there are restaurants and like our fitness studios were planning to stay open.
Yeah.
And about 3 days into the holiday is when we made the decision to close. There was just so much unknown going on and people were getting fearful and concerned. And, even trainers on the team were like, we don't necessarily feel comfortable either. But then people are coming into the studio with questions and asking all these things like, what are your sanitation and what precautionary measures are you doing? And it was kind of becoming overwhelming and no one really knew what was going on either. Mm-hmm. So it really was the last week of January when things started shutting and people were kind of like, I think I'm going to just stay indoors. Like it just feels a bit better.
Yeah. And when the Chinese do holidays, it's sort of like, it's a much bigger thing than in the United States, right? It goes on for longer periods of time. Is that right?
It's about a week. In the last few years, they've kind of extended it because it's the largest migration of people in the world. So mm-hmm. when you have that many people leaving in 1 week's time,
why is that though? What is that all? What is that all about? Tell me, educate me a bit. Why is there so many people moving, and what is the? Because that seems so different to me. That what happened,
I think it's just because it's a tradition that's built in, and it's the one time a year when everyone really goes back to their hometowns, their small mm-hmm. cities, and a lot of people that come into the cities like Shanghai, like our cleaners or the migrant workers, they're not from here. So this is the 1 week where they've saved up, they go back and see their own families, they take these long train rides. So it's kind of that migration to get back to their hometowns and just be with family, really.
That's great. Yeah. So they all get a chance to kind of touch base and get grounded for a week, right? Before they go back to the rat race or whatever. So things started shutting down around the holiday, and then, that's, about January-ish. And then what? Was it like a lockdown order? Was it this voluntary? Was this like, we're just trying to be safe? How does this what's the process there?
I think because it was, we were the first ones to experience it. Mm-hmm. It was kind of this unknown for the first week of, every venue's trying to do the right thing, the ones that had stayed open. Because again, not everything was open at this point because a lot had shut for the holiday. And then kind of day by day, you'd hear like, oh no, that business has shut and that business has shut. And there's a lot of expats that were still here that decided not to leave because it was so close to the Christmas holiday. And you'd be in these group chats where it'd be like, okay, this restaurant's open, let's go there. And then, the next day it closes and you'd be like, all right, well, let's go to this bar because that one we know is still open. But in terms of precautions, like there was mandates to check temperatures before you went into any venue. Certain masks started becoming a thing to wear, like you couldn't take a taxi if you didn't have a mask on. And then you just see different districts around Shanghai starting to close as well because there's different mayors for each district, and they'd be like, I'll close my district. It was almost like this war was going on, not a war, but this battle going on between the mayors of like, well, I don't want my district to get it, so I'm going to be the first one to shut. And then the other one would be like, well, I don't want my district to get it, so I'm going to shut. And so you'd see like this trickle down effect of different bars and cafes and that sort of thing just closing until almost everything had shut. But going back on that, there was never this stay at home mandate, but I think there was this fear of individuals who were here of whether it was coronavirus or whether it was just, you follow the rules of what your government tells you. So most people were staying inside. And because the city was very, very quiet as it was, if you were going out, you wouldn't really see people, or they'd be like on the other side of the street.
Well, that's good because around here, there's we're Americans, right? No one is going to tell us what to do, kind of a thing. So it takes. Sometimes you need constant putting the message, beating it over people's heads to get them to kind of get it. Start staying home. That kind of thing. So it's good to see that at least in where you were, people were kind of like, okay, this thing's happening. I also guess that they have a little bit more experience with this kind of not this global pandemic, but they've had experience with different kinds of flus and things like that. I mean, you mentioned masks. Now here they're getting closer to recommending people wear them, but in large parts of Asia, wearing a face mask is not unusual, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think it stems a lot from SARS when that came through, and a lot of people that are here now, of course, went through that. And so that's when that started becoming a trend. And I think there's just, if you've seen something that's worked, whether you know it to be true or not, it just has that mentality in the back of your head of, this is what we did that last time, so this is what we're going to do this time. Yeah,
absolutely. And no one's hurt by you wearing a mask, so it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah.
What do you know about Wuhan? How far away is it from Shanghai? Is it a place where the cities are interconnected at all, or is it just seem like what is your sense of the place, and do you know anything about it?
I've never been there. Train transport here is quite easy. So there's definitely trains you can get to. And I've been to provinces near it. I know it's about the distance from Orlando to like Raleigh, North Carolina. Last time when I was like doing my research, I was like, oh, this is about comparison right there. So yeah, I don't know too much, except that I do know it's a big manufacturer for automobiles and a lot of trade, import, export.
Excellent. Okay. So, I wasn't expecting that. My next question wasn't going to be, are you an expert in virology or anything? But I was just curious if you had any contact with Wuhan. So at this point, there's this flu coming out of there, and we all kind of have to protect ourselves. You're there in January, and see, because I don't know the timeline here. I mean, did you know anyone that got sick? Was there reports of people around you getting sick? Did it seem like this thing was going to be really bad? Because if you're on lockdown, maybe you were spared. So what happened in Shanghai?
No, I think because people did take it seriously here, and also because Shanghai isn't a place where a lot of people migrate to during Chinese New Year. Everyone goes back to their hometowns. So it was already quiet as it was. And then people were forced to stay in their hometowns. There was no traveling back into the city. Even some towns would like destroy their roads so that you couldn't come in and out, just to protect their cities or towns. So there was just no traveling back into the city. And I want to say the most cases we had was around 300, but I could be a little off on that fact. on that number. But no, there just wasn't much travel here, and people were just kind of respecting, we'll do this social distancing, and no one I've known was affected during that period as it were.
Wow. So 300 out of I don't know how many people live in Shanghai. I'm assuming it's some tens of millions, right? That's pretty insignificant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how long were you guys shut down for in total?
So we closed our studios on the like January 29th, and closed all three. We have three studios. So closed all three of them for a month. One opened March 1st, one opened the second week of March, so about 2 weeks after, and the third one just opened last week. So that took about 2 months in total for all three of them to get back.
So are you, so you're kind of back in the swing of things now? I mean, are you sort of back to normal?
Getting there. I mean, we do have members that are now stuck outside of China that can't come back because the border's been completely shut off. Mm-hmm. And then there are people that are here that are a bit more fearful to really interact and, get all sweaty back in the gym.
Yeah.
But I'd say for the most part, we're definitely getting there, and we're, trying to do things like, even when we were shut, we were trying to think ahead, which is one of those hard things to do, right? It's like we have all these ideas, but you can't really action them. So you're kind of just sitting tight until you can. But I think this week, when people have finished their 14-day quarantine, which was mandated within the last month, and slowly coming back into the gym, just ready to work out after being cooped up in their house forever, or just eating takeout forever. I think this week we're really going to start to see the life coming back into the studios, which is nice.
That's excellent. Now, here in the United States, we're getting reports of a lot of people losing their jobs. We had somewhere around 10 million have lost their jobs over the last 2 weeks. And people are it's good to see that, at least in your circumstance, maybe, things are changing and you're able to get back to normal. Maybe we can get back to normal, hopefully pretty soon. Did you see any, some of the economic impacts in those? Luckily you were able to open up again, but some people, maybe businesses become permanently shuttered, that kind of thing, or end up losing a spot in a company and it doesn't come back. Did you hear any of those kinds of stories?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been layoffs and cuts being made. And I think the biggest areas that I've seen affected personally are F&B, tourism, of course, and different industries like that. And I think, it's hard to say too, right, what will be that marker of when things can fully come back to normal, because of course, if you're in an industry like tourism, that's going to be a while unless you make some kind of local shift or online shift. Yeah. F&B, it seems that that's really starting to pick up now, especially because people can go into these venues, and anytime someone comes out of quarantine, they have this massive smile on their face, like stepping into the world for the first time. You're like, oh, it's been a while. Let's go out.
It's like coming out of a cave, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know what the hit in the long term is going to be. I think in another month we'll really know that. But we'll see how we go.
There's certainly a hope here that we can just somehow get back to, not 100%, but 95%, hopefully, because it's one of those things where it's not like there's no other reason for these businesses to shut down other than this health issue. So, we presumably you kind of hit a pause button and, maybe unpause it and go back to normal. So that's kind of what we're all hoping for.
Yeah, for sure.
Being at home and eating a lot of takeout. I'm getting that. We're getting delivery. We're kind of getting into that lifestyle. What did you do to keep yourself busy? I'd like to know if you can give us any tips on how you were able to maintain your sanity and not. Maybe I don't know if you have a roommate or not. Either attack somebody or just.
Well, my boyfriend and I are still together after the whole period, so that's a positive. I still created some kind of structure throughout my day and still tried to do something social, whether that was, when our coffee shops were open, going and getting a coffee and talking to the barista, or talking to my team, and we would do group calls and still had projects to work on. Like we were doing home workouts for all our members, so they had something else to keep them sane, and these little accountability challenges and that sort of thing. Just to be honest, I really just try to make the most of the period, because time is one thing I feel I really don't get here with my schedule and how busy of a city Shanghai is. It feels like New York on steroids sometimes. So just trying to really get to have these meaningful conversations that you don't get to have as much, and trying to stay positive, and even going for really long runs. I guess depends on if that's allowed where you're at, but yeah, just trying to use my time in a different way. And like I said, creating some structure so that it'd be like, if I wake up and do a home yoga session, then maybe even if it's reading a book, like I'm doing something that made me feel like I was getting something out of my day.
That's great. So yeah, to use that time, we're all kind of in the same boat with life being crazy, go, go, go. And then, when things sort of stop a bit, you're like, I don't know what to do, but you gave us some great tips. Reconnect with people, maybe, family, if you don't always, because maybe mom is bothering you for not calling enough. Maybe you take that extra time to give mom a call, work on some personal stuff. So that's great. Yeah. In terms of, the lockdown, we're not really locked down, at least here in Florida. It's sort of like you're advised to stay home. They closed the beaches, certainly. And that's the thing about gathering for 10 people or more. But there's a lot of businesses that are still open, certainly grocery stores, but even like most national chain retailers like auto parts, certainly Home Depot, places like that. So I think we can, beyond that though, if you want to stay away, all the parks are open, so you can go out, have a run, take the dog out, do whatever, go out and have a picnic, just kind of keep your distance. So I do see people out a lot more in the parks. So maybe they're taking that opportunity to do some exercise and that kind of a thing. So you are almost through this thing then, right? I mean, because I kind of, you look at this thing as a hump, and it seems like China, where you're at, and Shanghai, you guys are basically kind of really almost through this thing, whereas here in the United States, we haven't even gotten to that peak yet. So what's something positive, because I think you're almost like rearing to go. What message would you give to everybody who's at this point, it doesn't quite look hopeless, but it looks kind of dire?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I can say is to stay positive as much as possible. Take a break from social media for a bit. Take a break from the news. Like, not every day. Like, it is good to check in and know what's going on, but it's also not something to be so attached to where you're just feeling a sense of overwhelm and you feel like you can't catch your breath because there's so much information being given to you. And I think one thing I've noticed now is that there's all this information overload, whereas when it was just kind of China and Asia, it didn't feel like there was so much being shared. And now that it is the entire world, it's like, whoa, there's so many tips out there. It's, it's okay to take a break and not get so stuck in it that you feel like, oh, I haven't done 25 things today because I have all this time.
Right. And
it's not great either. Like, if you don't feel like doing one thing, that's okay too. Don't be too hard on yourself, stay positive. And I think the biggest thing for me too was because I had a lot of these had more conversations with friends and family, I found myself laughing a lot more than I do on my normal day to day, because, sometimes you're like, oh, I can meet you for 30 minutes for coffee, but then I have to dash, and really getting involved with the conversation. You're like just reconnecting with friends or even making new friends, people you wouldn't really normally have time for a conversation for, and getting to know them on a better level. And I don't know, I just found like that was kind of a bright light for me of just connecting and smiling and laughing and just doing what you can do.
That's great. There's nothing like a good laugh, right? It's kind of the best thing there is.
Best medicine.
You mentioned smartphones earlier. I want to make sure that we didn't miss anything there about because you sort of were saying how where you are, things seem to be a little bit more advanced in terms of everything being interconnected, and how that may have helped with spreading the virus or keeping the public being more safe. So talk a little bit more about that if you could.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those interesting things that is built into a place like China. But because we are on our phones so much, and I mean, for better or for worse, they do track our, where we're going, where we've been, kind of thing. And if you've just stepped off a flight, for example, we have an app called Alipay. And so it'll change our QR code. So if anyone had just come back from the US in the last week, before they closed the borders, the QR code would show red, and that means, okay, you're taken to your home and you're quarantined for the 2 weeks. And then once your QR code turns green, that means you're allowed to come back into the city. So it's something like that, where it's almost regimented that you can't really move freely about. But it is interesting how interlaced all of that becomes when something like this happens.
So because you're so reliant on using this method of payment, then unless you would have to go out and try to get cash or something to avoid it, it would be very difficult. Is that kind of the idea there?
Yeah, and it's not just cash. It's, we use these apps for so many more things. Like I said, I mean, ordering a car, of course, that's cash, but it's also tracking your movement, right? Or a bike that you can scan on the street and you borrow the bike and go to next block, but it's a tracker.
That's interesting. Yeah, because here we don't, as far as I know, there's really no enforcement. They have people coming in from, like, say, New York City, where it's just like the absolute worst. I think almost half. I believe nearly half of all deaths have come from either New York or New Jersey. So some places are, if you're coming from a place like New York City, you have to quarantine for 14 days. But it's more like you just say it, and how do you know that they're actually quarantining themselves for that period of time? They could just go out. There's really no way of knowing.
Yeah.
Now, there's this thing about wet markets. Have you seen, do they have those in Shanghai?
Yeah, they don't have as many as they used to. The city's definitely done some cleanup type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, for the most part, when you reference a wet market in China, it's kind of just like any market you would go to for your fruits, your vegetables, some seafood. It's not going to have like a jaguar and a crocodile over there.
Not a bat, I would hope.
Not typically.
Okay. Have you seen anything? Well, not anything weird, but just something. Every culture is different. Is there any kind of type of food that maybe you thought was kind of weird and maybe kind of gross that you ended up eating and liked?
There's they used to have snake, where they would take the snake and they would skin it and fry it and put it on the table.
It was actually good?
It just tastes like fried whatever.
What do you actually, besides weird things that you tried, what's your favorite thing to eat typically?
My favorite Chinese food is probably a jianbing. It's kind of like an egg pancake that they serve in the morning, just on a flat iron skillet, and add some toppings and fried dough sticks and chives, and it's delicious.
Yeah, sounds very good. Have you tried to bring any your American favorites over to any of your Chinese friends, and how's that gone over?
I mean, I guess so. I'll bring like fun candies and stuff like that around holiday times.
Uh-huh.
I used to have an Italian roommate who I gave cheese whiz to, which she loved and I hate, but it
does not give you a good impression of Americans. Here's my cheese whiz.
Yeah, it's definitely a melting pot here. So there's a lot of cross-culture food.
Yeah. As you said, it's a global city, so people are probably familiar with things. Before I let you go, you mentioned about traveling throughout China. Talk a little bit about that and maybe some of your favorite places and what they were like.
Sure. Let's see. I really enjoy Xiamen, which is more of a coastal water town. And near there's these chulo houses, which are thousands of years old, built out of mud, and they're round.
Oh, wow.
And everyone lives in the communities are all in them, but they kind of have this like shared area in the center. I've done a marathon there where you kind of run and see the houses, which is quite cool. And then of course you have your traditional cities like Beijing and Xi'an, which has the terracotta warriors, and the food is awesome there.
I went there in Disney World. They have in Epcot. They have the
yeah, they do. That is correct. I definitely worked at Disney as well in Orlando.
What's your favorite city that you visited?
In China?
Yeah. Or anywhere.
Anywhere. That's a tough question. I'll waste too much time trying to think about that,
Okay.
I think. I really like Huangshan, which is a mountain town quite close to Shanghai. And I just go there kind of for an escape of just running trails and staying at some homestays there and just getting out into nature because we don't get too much of that here.
That's great. Lauren, I want to thank you so much for coming on, talking about the impact of the coronavirus on the community and the culture around the world. That your experience, I think, is a really positive one, that you were able to kind of get through that, maintain your sanity, and ready to kind of get back to life full bore. I think it's really encouraging. Do you have any last words for all of us here in the United States who are just kind of hoping we don't get sick, number one, and know anyone that gets sick, and then two, trying to move on with our lives?
Yeah, I mean, stay safe, keep practicing social distancing, try and get the community involved on that, and stay positive. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, so don't think you're never going to be able to hug your friends and family again, because, you'll get through it too. It's just everyone work together and support each other and keep smiling.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep smiling. Now, Lauren, if people want to follow you and what you're doing, are you active on social media? Any place where you want to share to anybody so they can follow your story?
Sure. My Instagram account is probably the one thing that I use. So my username is Hogie, Hoghie. So quite simple and straightforward. That's it.
Excellent. So follow Lauren. You could maybe a video will leak out of her as an instructor yelling at somebody, chewing them out. Get moving.
In Chinese.
Lauren, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I certainly hope you enjoyed that interview. I definitely did. Great talking to Lauren Hogan. I wanted to just give you some of my closing thoughts. I found it very surprising that much of Shanghai made it out unscathed. Lauren was saying something around 300 people out of a massive city, just 300 getting sick. And it shows, I think, the contrast between the two societies, being the United States and China, sort of how they handle this versus how we handle this. Now, there's two big things going on that Lauren mentioned. This sort of digital tracking, really, digital surveillance, if you want to call it that, where if you got an app on your phone, everything is on here. And you do everything on your phone, people can track it. I'm assuming that these app makers are sharing that information with the government. So, for example, she mentioned that 14-day quarantine, you can't do anything. It basically raises almost a literal red flag if you're out of your house trying to do commerce. And which, that's that debate, right? It's weighing that public safety versus your personal freedom. We're certainly having that debate here in the United States, trying to figure out, how do you strike that balance? And it's really a tough one. And in China, certainly it seems like they've leaned more towards that safety security versus personal freedom. And you might say, well, I don't want to live in a place like that where they're tracking me on my phone and they tell me I can't leave my house, this kind of thing, and they know everywhere I go. On the other hand, only 300 people got sick in Shanghai. So it's at least worth thinking about. And it's not just the digital stuff. It's the way they locked down, like, say, the city of Wuhan. I mean, completely locked down. You cannot leave. And, the question is, if I want to leave the city, what happens? Will there be violence from the government? Possibly. We don't do that here. We've got New Yorkers fleeing, and they go to Rhode Island, they go wherever. You might say, well, 14 days, stay quarantined, stay self-quarantined. There's no enforcement of that. You're just totally relying on someone's word that they're not that immediately after traveling, after being cooped up so they can get out and get somewhere else that's not on total lockdown, that they're then going to sit for 14 days and not move. It's very hard for people to do that, particularly when there's doesn't seem like there's any real enforcement of it unless you happen to get stopped by the police or something. So, what do we do? Shut down Manhattan, close the bridges, or just, completely lock down all of New York City? That would be the equivalent. As I mentioned to Lauren, somewhere around half the deaths or maybe more of the coronavirus have come from New York or parts of New Jersey. Most of the country is not nearly as affected as just basically one city. So should we shut it down? That's the debate we've been having. Another great takeaway is from Lauren, having gone through this thing and now really almost completely out the way and getting back to normal, was that this advice to stay positive. I think mental health has been a concern for many people, particularly if you've had to then change your routine. If you've lost your job and now you're home and you can't go get a job, for most places, because very few places are hiring, and the jobs that are available, the competition must be pretty high, people scrambling to do those things, and in some cases, jobs that will put you in danger of coming in contact with the public, like, say, working in an Amazon warehouse or something. So her advice to stay positive, I thought, was really good. Try to find things, if you've been putting things off because of your busy lifestyle, do that, we can do some personal projects. The other thing about reconnecting with family and friends, and I had to think about, maybe call your mother because you don't call her enough. Do something like that. Give them a call. Find out how they're doing. Try to find a way to reconnect, even though you can't physically, but to do it, virtually over the phone, that kind of thing. And another thing she mentioned too, don't put too much pressure on yourself to do that. If you don't feel like doing your project today, don't. Relax. Try to be happy. Try to put a smile on. Do something that will put a smile on your face and make you laugh. So I hope you all enjoyed this bit of a chat. I certainly did. I want to thank Lauren again for sharing your experiences and to give us some kind of a hope that we can actually get through this thing. Thanks for watching.